The 25th of October 2022. Singapore Airlines flight SQ319 from London is preparing for a routine landing in Singapore. But instead of the city lights, the pilots are met by an impenetrable wall of a tropical storm. The situation instantly becomes critical. The alternate airport on Batam Island is also being engulfed by the weather, and the Boeing 777 has less than enough fuel for one more go-around. 280 passengers have no idea they are seconds away from engine failure. How did the crew fly themselves into a trap, performing 3 go-arounds with a mayday call? And why bureaucracy almost killed hundreds of people? Let's reconstruct the timeline of events. London, Heathrow, the 25th of October 2022. An ordinary autumn evening. The terminals are buzzing, but for the Singapore Airlines crew, the day is just beginning with the ride on the crew bus. They are about to operate flight SQ319, a 13-hour marathon across half the globe, heading straight for Singapore Changi Airport. The pilots open the flight briefing packet and dive into the numbers. At first glance, perfect conditions for the flight. The charts show a clear route. No major cyclones or complex weather fronts that would worry experienced aviators. It seems like it will be an easy cruise through the night sky. But aviation doesn't tolerate complacency, and the first warning sign is hidden in the destination forecast. The meteorologists warn of evening thunderstorms in Singapore. For the tropics, that's routine, business as usual. The forecast is also reassuring. The weather will be short-lived, and visibility will remain within normal limits. The crew checks the alternate airports: Paya Lebar Air Base, Kuala Lumpur, and Sinai. The picture is similar there. Thunderstorms are forecasted everywhere, but on paper, the weather meets safety requirements. Formally, everything is clear. Now comes the moment of a crucial decision, one that will determine the fate of the flight 13 hours later. Fuel. The flight plan already includes the standard contingency reserve, 3 to 5% for unforeseen deviations. The computer gives the final figure: 166 tons of kerosene. The pilots assess the risks. Route shortcuts over Europe promise to save time. The overall forecast is favorable. They approve the plan. The decision is firm. They do not order any extra fuel beyond what the automation calculated. The engines will start with exactly that amount, and not a drop more. 13,400 hours in the air. That's the colossal experience sitting in the left captain's seat today. The 55-year-old captain, a true veteran who knows the Boeing 777 better than the back of his hand. On this type alone, he has logged an impressive 10,075 hours. Next to him is the 31-year-old first officer. He's younger, but his qualifications are solid, with over 2,200 hours on the 777. While the aircraft is being prepared for departure, the pilots assign roles. Today, the younger man has the controls. The first officer is designated pilot flying. He will physically fly the plane. The captain takes on the role of pilot monitoring. His task is to monitor the instruments, handle radio communications, and back up his colleague. It's standard practice that allows the crew to work as a single mechanism. Their machine is a Boeing 777-300ER, the extended range variant. Hanging under the wings are 2 giants: General Electric GE 90-115B engines, the most powerful in commercial aviation. Before departure, the captain carefully studies the technical log. The pages are clean. No deferred defects, no remarks. The aircraft is fully operational and ready. In the cabin, 280 passengers take their seats, completely unaware of the events awaiting them at the end of their journey. At 20:06 local time, right on schedule, the Boeing begins its roll down runway 27 right at Heathrow and climbs into the night sky. Takeoff and climb up perfect, textbook. Over Europe, air traffic controllers give the crew a gift: several route shortcuts. The plane cuts corners on the airways, saving precious fuel and time. It seems luck is on their side. As they approach Singapore's airspace, the navigation system shows they are a full 30 minutes ahead of schedule. They have an excellent time buffer and a perfectly functioning machine. But the pilots don't yet know. Sometimes arriving early just means being the first to meet a storm that hasn't had time to clear. Entering Singapore's area of responsibility looks deceptively calm. The crew contacts the approach controller, and the standard instruction comes through the headsets. Expect an ILS approach for runway 20 right. No panic, no rush. The first officer, whose hands are currently controlling the multi-ton machine, calmly inputs the data into the computer and begins the pre-landing briefing. He calls out the altitudes, frequencies, and the go-around procedure, completely unaware of how soon he'll need to use those words. On the flight management system displays, reassuring numbers glow. Estimated landing time, 16:23. Projected fuel remaining on touchdown, 7 tons. That's more than comfortable. The emergency minimum, that critical red line, is 3 tons, so they have a 4-ton cushion of kerosene above the critical limit. The pilots are relaxed. The plane is ahead of schedule, and it seems that in half an hour they'll be taxiing to the gate. But aviation loves to shatter plans at the very last moment. As soon as the altimeter shows 15,000 feet, the controller's tone changes. Instead of clearance for further descent, the command comes, "Hold," at the PASPO waypoint. The reason sounds like a verdict for their early arrival. Wind. Nature has played a cruel trick. The wind over the airfield has suddenly strengthened and is blowing from behind for landing aircraft. Its speed exceeds 10 knots, the strict safety limit. Landing a heavy Boeing with such a tailwind is not allowed. The risk of overrunning the runway is too great. Controllers are forced to urgently flip the airport, change the active runway direction to the opposite one. It's a complex logistical operation. Dozens of aircraft already lined up on one side now have to turn around and approach from the other. The sky over Singapore becomes a giant carousel. As the Boeing circles in the holding pattern, the captain glances at the weather radar. What he sees makes his heart beat faster. The screen isn't just showing clouds. It's covered in alarming bright spots. Right over the airport they're trying to reach, powerful thunderstorm cells are hovering, and this wall of water and electricity isn't going anywhere. The massive thunderstorm front covering Singapore isn't just sitting still. It stretches in a long tongue to the northwest, devouring everything in its path. The captain assesses the situation and realizes their options are rapidly vanishing. Paya Lebar Air Base and Senai Airport, which just recently were safe havens, are now hidden under a thick layer of red zones on the weather radar. The path there is cut off by a wall of rain and turbulence. Kuala Lumpur remains, but it's too far. Diverting there would require an immediate route change and burn precious tons of fuel, robbing the crew of decision-making flexibility. It's at this moment the captain finds an unexpected alternative. His gaze falls to the south, where practically next to Singapore lies the Indonesian island of Batam and Hang Nadim Airport. According to the radar, the sky there is still clear. This airport isn't in their flight plan as an official alternate, but right now it looks like a lifeline. A chance to buy time and circle a bit longer in hope that Singapore will open up. A new instruction comes over the radio. The wind has finally settled. Controllers change the rules. Runway 02 left is now active. The crew receives vectors for the approach from the new direction, and it seems the puzzle is finally coming together. The pilots prepare to punch through the weather. But on the ground at that moment, a meteorological hell is breaking loose. The skies over Changi Airport have opened up. The rain is so dense, visibility drops to a critical 500 meters. The wind goes crazy. Due to the thunderstorm front hanging right over the runway, the airflow is chaotically shifting direction by almost 180 degrees. The two aircraft ahead of them attempt to land, but can't handle the turbulence and execute go-arounds. The controllers realize it's pointless to continue. The airport officially suspends acceptance of all arriving flights until the weather improves. The doors to Singapore are locked shut. Every minute, the two giant General Electric engines convert between 100 and 130 kilograms of kerosene into thrust. It's the relentless math of survival. While the plane hangs in the air, its life force is literally evaporating. The estimated landing time is long past. That comfortable 7-ton cushion they planned to touch down with in Singapore has melted away. Now the countdown begins. At 16:29, the controller gives new instructions. The crew is ordered to hold at the Semco waypoint. They need to stay in the air for at least 5 more minutes while the airport assesses the situation. The captain quickly does the math in his head. If they circle until 16:34 as requested, their remaining fuel will drop to 5,900 kilograms. It's still acceptable, but the safety cushion is becoming frighteningly thin. To save time, the captain tunes the radio to Batam Airport's frequency and listens to the ATIS broadcast. The message comes over the air. A VOR approach is in use for runway 22. It seems like the perfect plan B. But the weather has another surprise for the pilots. That monstrous storm system that closed Singapore isn't standing still. It's slowly but surely crawling south, straight towards Batam. Their alternate airport is about to be covered by the same storm. The captain understands the time for diplomacy is over. He gets on the radio and delivers an ultimatum to the controller. They have fuel for exactly one holding pattern circuit. The moment this holding pattern is complete, they immediately head for Batam, clearance or not. Singapore Approach instantly contacts their counterparts in Tanjung Penang to coordinate the aircraft's acceptance. But instead of an instant yes, a tense silence hangs over the radio. Batam Airport is in no rush to confirm. It's a small airfield, used to light jets, and the local services simply don't know if they can safely handle and park a massive wide-body Boeing 777. While the engines keep gulping fuel, the crew is left in limbo, with no runway beneath them and no confirmed alternate ahead. The radio silence is broken by news the crew fears most. Landings in Singapore are still not happening. The airport is closed. The clock reads 16:36, and the captain makes a risky decision: to fly one more, final, full holding pattern. It's a cold calculation, bordering on gambling. The captain knows these 6 minutes of flight will burn the remaining kerosene, dropping the estimated fuel on board to 5,100 kilograms. That number only looks impressive on paper. In reality, it's just over a ton above the critical threshold. The moment each main tank drops below 2,000 kilograms, the cockpit will light up with the alarming low fuel quantity indication. The crew is literally bringing the plane to the red line, beyond which emergency procedures begin. The circle is complete, and the controller issues a new vector, heading 180. The pilots look at the compass and grasp the absurdity. This course takes them away from desired Singapore and, worse, away from life-saving Batam. The reason is simple and terrifying. The small island airport still hasn't confirmed it's ready for the giant Boeing 777. Controllers on the ground are frantically trying to coordinate parking, but the go-ahead never comes. Instead of heading into the unknown, the captain tries to buy just a little more time. He requests permission for a 360-degree turn right over the Semco waypoint. It's a maneuver of desperation, just 2 minutes of circling, hoping the weather in Singapore will miraculously clear or Batam will finally answer. But no miracle occurs. The plane completes the turn, and the wall of rain over Singapore remains unmoved. The fuel gauge needle keeps creeping down. The time games are over. The captain finally utters the phrase that puts an end to attempts to get home. They are diverting to the alternate airfield. And they are not alone in their plight. By this time, 3 other airliners have already given up and turned away from Singapore. Flight 319 becomes the 4th aircraft to lose the battle with the elements. Salvation turns into a trap the moment the airliner turns onto course for the alternate. The storm front the crew so desperately tried to escape is faster than the plane. The same fury raging over Singapore is now raging over Batam's runway. A tropical downpour drenches the concrete, and gusty winds are ready to toss the multi-ton machine from side to side. The quiet harbor is no longer safe. But there's no way back. Tension in the cockpit peaks, and the captain changes the lineup. He announces he's taking control, becoming the pilot flying. The yoke is now in the hands of the most experienced crew member, while the first officer is given the critical task. Urgently prepare the navigation for a VOR approach to runway 22. Here lies a treacherous technical detail that will play its role in minutes. The pilots check the documents and see a hard restriction. Automatic landing at Batam Airport is permitted, but only for a precision ILS approach. They are facing a VOR approach, less precise, requiring manual control and visual contact with the runway. But even in this stressful race, the human mind seeks an easy way out. Having already begun the diversion, the crew asks the controller again, "Have landings in Singapore not resumed?" It's a last, almost irrational hope to cancel the difficult decision, but the ground's reply is relentless. The weather there is still terrible. The time is 16:46. Bureaucracy begins to jeopardize flight safety. The crew is given shocking news. The final official clearance to divert to Batam still isn't there. Controllers begin vectoring, lining the plane up on final approach, essentially on a wing and a prayer, hoping the clearance will arrive any second. 2 more minutes pass. 16:48. The controller confirms again. Coordination is ongoing. At this moment, the math of the flight becomes frightening. The estimated remaining fuel is only about 4,500 kilograms. For a giant like the Boeing, these are practically empty tanks. The first officer presses the radio button and utters the phrase that escalates the situation to a pre-emergency. Minimum fuel. It's a clear signal to controllers. No more delays, no holding, no more coordination. Any extra minute now leads to disaster. Exactly 2 minutes pass. Exactly the time it takes to realize the warnings are no longer working. The captain looks at the calculations. The expected fuel remaining at landing is below 3,000 kilograms. This is the line where professional politeness ends. The captain gets back on the radio, and now his tone leaves no room for discussion. Singapore Airlines 319, Mayday fuel. From that second, the bureaucratic machine stops. Cues, coordination, and polite requests vanish. The controller immediately declares radio silence for other aircraft and gives Flight 319 absolute priority. All paths are open for the airliner. The plane is directed for a VOR approach to runway 22 at Batam Airport. But inside the cockpit, the situation heats up to the limit. The captain is now working for 2. He's physically piloting the heavy machine in turbulence, while simultaneously conducting intense radio communication, breaking the golden rule of workload distribution. The first officer is feverishly reconfiguring the navigation systems, trying to keep up with the rapidly changing plan. At 1700, as the plane is on final approach, nature strikes another blow. The controller relays wind data. Tailwind, 14 knots, gusting to 30. These are catastrophic numbers. For a Boeing 777, the maximum certified tailwind limit is 15 knots, and Singapore Airlines' strict rules prohibit landing if it exceeds 10. Gusts up to 30 knots make a safe touchdown physically impossible. At an altitude of 1,600 feet, the crew realizes they cannot land. The captain pushes the thrust levers forward, executing a go-around. The airliner roars away from the ground, burning precious kilograms of kerosene they barely had left. They climb to 1,800 feet to turn around and attempt an approach from the opposite direction, using the ILS system. And it's at this moment the cockpit fills with a sound that chills the blood. The displays light up with the warning, "Low fuel quantity." This is no longer a computer forecast, it's a fact. A critical minimum is sloshing in the tanks, and the plane is still airborne. The low fuel warning dictates its own harsh rules, forcing pilots to take counterintuitive measures. According to the emergency QRH checklist, the crew limits flap extension to just 20 degrees. Normally, 30 is used for a stable landing, but now every extra degree of drag is the enemy. The logic of this requirement is written in bitter experience. If the tanks run completely dry and the engines stop, the flaps 20 configuration will allow the plane to glide longer and offer a chance to reach the concrete in dead silence. The captain knows time is against them and decides to risk the flight geometry. Instead of a smooth, wide approach, he banks into a steep turn just 6 nautical miles from the runway, deliberately cutting the pattern short. He is trying to cheat the distance to get on the ground as fast as possible. The plan hinges on trust in automation. The pilot counts on the onboard computer to take over and execute a perfect autoland, correcting the flaws of manual piloting. But physics is hard to cheat. The airliner crosses the runway centerline at 1,000 feet, just 2 miles from the threshold. It's too high and too close. To compensate, the plane's nose drops, and the machine begins to dive toward the ground at a vertical speed of 1,300 feet per minute. At 17:05, through the sheets of tropical rain, the pilots finally make out the runway lights. Visual contact is established. Noticing the capture of the localizer and glide slope beams, the captain immediately engages the autopilot, handing control to the machine. But the computer instantly assesses the trajectory and refuses to be an accomplice to this chaos. The display flashes "No autoland." The system sees what is obvious. The plane is significantly above the glide path and left of the centerline. Stabilizing such a behemoth on such a short segment is now impossible. The ground rushes up to meet them, but landing in this position would certainly end in an accident. The radio altimeter counts down the final meters. At a height of just 132 feet, the height of a 12-story building, nerves fray, and common sense overrides the desire to land at any cost. The captain presses the toga button. The engines roar to go around power again, and the Boeing climbs into the sky, executing its second consecutive go-around with nearly empty tanks. 2,000 kilograms. That's all that separates the 300-ton machine from becoming a gliding piece of metal. As the engines roar, pulling the airliner back up to 3,000 feet, the situation shifts from difficult to catastrophic. The arrival delay is now 46 minutes. Every second of that time was paid for with kerosene that is no longer there. The estimated fuel remaining hovers around the 2,000 kilogram mark. For a Boeing 777, these are mere vapors. The captain frantically searches for a way out. He calls the controller for information on runway 22, hoping that the wind or visibility there might give them a chance. But the reply from the ground kills that hope. The visibility there is even worse than here. Going there is pointless. Furthermore, the crew simply doesn't have the fuel for maneuvers around the airport. They're backed into a corner. A hard decision is made: to repeat the approach to the same runway 04 they just left. The pilot banks into a turn, lining up the aircraft on final approach at a critically short distance, just 5.5 miles from the threshold. This is an incredibly short distance to stabilize a massive airliner. At 17:11, a voice comes through the headset. Visibility has improved to 800 meters. It's a tiny window of opportunity, and they have to hit it on the first try. But inside the cockpit, stress is breaking standard procedures. The captain, who should be fully focused on controlling the unstable aircraft, continues to handle the radio communications himself, overloading his attention. The first officer, whose help is critical right now, is effectively cut out of the communication loop. The flaps are again set to only 20 degrees. The crew is still conserving energy in case of a complete engine failure. They manage to capture the localizer beacon when they're just 2 miles from the runway. That's almost nothing. When the plane bursts out of the clouds, a sense of déjà vu overwhelms the pilots. They see the runway again, but once more, they are not aligned. The airliner is above the glide path and left of the center line. The captain tries to dive toward the ground, pushing the control column forward. The rate of descent instantly jumps to a terrifying 1,400 feet per minute. Warning systems begin screaming of danger. The ground is rushing up, but the angle is too steep, the speed too high. At 17:14, at a height of just 212 feet, lower than the spire of an ordinary TV tower, their nerves give out. To continue the descent would be madness. The captain pushes the thrust levers forward again. For the third time this endless evening, Flight 319 executes a go-around, leaving the saving concrete below and taking the last drops of fuel back into the sky. The Boeing 777 climbs almost vertically, like a rocket, with an incredible climb rate of 4,300 feet per minute. This isn't a standard maneuver. It's an escape. The engines are at their limit, burning the remaining fuel at an alarming rate. But the crew has no choice. They need a safe distance from the ground to think of any plan for survival. The pilots quickly stop the climb and level off at 2,000 feet. There's no room left in the cockpit for doubt or complex calculations. The captain contacts approach control and states the grim truth. Fuel reserves are now critically low. There will be no more instrument approaches, no long patterns or procedure turns. The captain announces his decision. They will fly straight in, then perform a visual turn to reverse course and land immediately on runway 22. It's risky, it requires skill, but it's the only way to shorten the distance. There's only enough fuel left for this. The math of survival at this moment is terrifying. Although no one saw the exact numbers then, calculations later showed that less than 1,000 kilograms of kerosene remained sloshing in the tanks of the huge airliner. For an aircraft of this class, those are essentially dry tanks. If they miss again, the engines will simply stop in flight. Approach control urgently relays the weather data. Wind from 330 degrees at 15 knots. The crew instantly translates this into practical terms. Landing on runway 22 means they'll be landing with a tailwind component of about 6 knots. On any other day, the captain might have refused, opting for a headwind for safety. But today he agrees instantly. 6 knots on the tail is an acceptable price to pay to be on the ground right now. The crew prepares the aircraft for the fourth, final approach. This time, fate finally turns to face them. That very wall of bad weather that had tormented them for the last hour has shifted far to the south. The path to the runway is clear. At 17:19, the landing gear touches the concrete of runway 22. The airliner slows and turns off the runway. The roar of the engines fades, and a deafening silence falls. When technicians and pilots look at the fuel gauge readings, it's chilling. The remaining fuel is significantly below even the emergency reserve. We'll never know the precise figure to the last kilogram, but even conservative estimates point to one thing. If they had been forced into a fifth circuit, this story would have ended very differently. Even the most experienced aviators break into a cold sweat at the thought of landing with such fuel remaining. As the engines fall silent and passengers begin to disembark, the investigators' work is just beginning. They open the black boxes and reconstruct the timeline of every second of that chaotic evening to understand how a modern airliner came within a hair's breadth of gliding in silence. In the final report, the experts deliver a verdict, pointing to two main culprits: extreme weather conditions and the pilot's decision. The investigators highlight a critical psychological moment, that very desire to land at the destination at all costs. It's a treacherous trap for the mind. When you see the lights of home and know the gate is just there, the brain resists the idea of diverting to an alternate airport. The crew clung to the hope that the weather in Singapore would improve for too long, instead of turning the aircraft around earlier, while the tanks were still full. Yet, within this document lies a detail that makes it unique in aviation history. It is one of the few reports where investigators officially point to a global, invisible enemy: climate change. The experts state plainly, storms are becoming more intense, more aggressive, and more unpredictable than before. The weather patterns pilots have relied on for decades are beginning to fail. The sky is changing, and decision-making in the cockpit must now account for this new, more brutal reality. Singapore Airlines responds to the incident immediately and constructively.
The airline doesn't just close the case, it turns this flight into a training manual. The scenario of Flight 319 is now included in pilot training programs. In the safety of simulators, new crews relive this stress, learning to recognize that fine line where perseverance turns into unjustifiable risk. Furthermore, the company updates its fuel planning guidelines, emphasizing more conservative calculations during the tropical rain season. Interestingly, the Investigation Bureau itself decides not to issue any new recommendations for the industry. The reason is simple: the safety rules are already written, and they work if followed meticulously. This case becomes a powerful reminder for everyone who takes to the sky. Sometimes, a pilot's true strength lies not in the ability to land a plane in a storm, but in the ability to say no in time and go where it's safe.